Definitely not that.
Good evening. Tonight, our budget session will be Monty Tech and the Fitchburg School Department. I'd like to make one announcement prior to the budget session. We hear a lot about the doom and gloom and things that are going on. The city of Fitchburg today, in case anyone didn't hear it, received a grant from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts delivered by Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray in the amount of $1.3 million. That $1.3 million is going to be used for infrastructure for the development of a new industrial park off Airport Road in Fitchburg, and the road will go all the way up to Simon's Saw and Steel Company, where they will be another company will be constructing a biomass energy generation facility. A gigantic grant for the city of Fitchburg, and a real step forward in economic development. And I thought that those people who haven't heard it, or those people watching on television tonight, would like to hear some real good news for the city of Fitchburg. $1.3 million grant is a giant grant, and we thank Lieutenant Governor Murray for taking the trip out here to bring the check out. Let us start this evening with Monty Tech, which is page 70 in your budget. Mr. Culkeen, Superintendent, and Mark Looney, would you like to come forward? Member of the school committee and Fitchburg representative on the school committee. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening.
Show is yours.
We had sent in advance our educational plan budget, but I brought additional copies. I don't know if there's anyone who needs one to follow along. What did you say? Yeah. Just pass them. We had mailed them. I don't know where they went. Sorry.
If you'd like to if you'd like to begin with your mission statement and a little bit of what's going on in Monty Tech, we would appreciate it.
Good evening, and we're in towards the end of our budget process. This is the 12 town meetings in the month of May. As you know, there's 18 cities and towns that make up the budget, and I've met with the city of Gardner, and now I'm meeting with the city of Fitchburg, so I welcome the opportunity. There are currently 408 students from the city of Fitchburg at Monty Tech. The proposed assessment before you this evening is 600. $1.8 million, $1,871,885, which is a total increase from last year of $87,601. Of that $87,000, $54,073 is an increase in your minimum contribution. There is one additional student over last year, so that bumps up your contribution slightly. Our total budget is $22 million, $388,670, which if you turn to page 1 in the booklet I gave you, you can see that amount. It's a $1.2 million increase. Where do we propose to get the $1.2 million from? There's a couple of, we're funding with over $700,000 out of reserves from Monty Tech. We have an E&D account, excess and deficiency, which by law we can keep 5% of our budget, equal to 5% of our budget in this account. So there's about $500,000 coming out of that to balance the budget. We feel that we can safely do that without jeopardizing that reserve fund for unexpected expenditures. And the other $200,000 is coming from our school choice account and from tuition account, revolving accounts, for a total of $700,000. So the balance of that 1.2 million is coming from increased assessments. Total increase, so that 1.2 million is the total increase. Of that 1.2 million, we're asking cities and towns for 258,000 of it. That's an average increase of 3.6% for all the communities. And I say average because depending on whether your student enrollment's gone up or down, you might find your percentage higher or lower. But the assessments are an increase of 3.64% over last year. And your total number of school-age attending children increased by 157 students. So your percentage of the capital budget actually went up a little because for this year, the term ahead, the ownership of the school went up. So your percentage of, we have two budgets, the capital budget, which is determined by your school-age attending children, and the operating, which is determined by how many students you actually are physically sending. So that's, I mean, why are increases no different than what you're facing? Our utility costs are up 20%, 28%. Health insurance cost for the district is up 15%. And that utilities, health insurance, we have a contractual salary obligation of 3% to pay. And that's really where the bulk of the major increases. Utilities, there is an increase in supply and materials. We buy a lot. We have 20 industries really that we're running at Monty Tech. The price of steel, welding gases, lumber is all escalating. So I think the committee did a very good job at keeping the increase to a minimum. I know the difficulties that you're facing here, and you would like to see no increase. I realize that, and I read the papers, I hear the pressures. I read about the pressures that the community is facing. We appreciate that, but I think 3.64% on average increase is not excessive. My role is to advocate for what is educationally needed, and I feel that I'm doing that with that percentage, but I'd be glad to answer your questions and address your concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Loney, do you have anything you'd like to add? Although I must say, your last appearance at the City Council gave us an excellent insight as to what is going on in Monty Tech, and to be commended for that. It was a great presentation.
Thank you very much. I enjoy being there. And I just want to reemphasize what Mr. Culkeen said. We're only talking an increase in one city department, a school, of $87,000. That's it. and it's a very good deal for the city of Fitchburg to have approximately 400 students being educated. I just want to emphasize that again. And I know I did all that before. That needs to be heard.
Thank you. Councilor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. President. Dick, maybe you could help me out with this, but in our budget sheet, it said the department request, the mayor request, is $1.9 million. And Mr. Culkeen said we're at 1.871885, if I'm correct. So we could easily chop off 28,115.
I believe so. The only caution is sometimes the assessment is revised. I think the school usually revises it downward, not upward. So maybe after you hear an explanation, there may be an opportunity there.
I don't know when the mayor set her budget. She could have used a round number, and
Yeah.
at one point it probably was that number when they first called and asked, what our assessment's going to be, and that's based on what happens at our public hearing. So it will be no higher than the number that I'm giving you. If we receive any additional state aid, though it looks unlikely, but we will do our final budget in August at our August school committee meeting when we have the final state numbers. The only thing that we might see a slight increase in is transportation, and for the past 2 years we've reduced the assessment by whatever additional funding is coming in. I mean, that's That's by vote of the school committee, so they could vote otherwise, but it's always been my recommendation that they do that, and they've followed through and done it. So you're safe to cut that 28,000.
And I think that would add that to the list if I could.
Okay.
28,115. Thank you.
Counselor Starr?
Thank you, Mr. President. Couple questions. First of all, and I think Captain Lowney explained this to us, but I just like to be refreshed. What's the maximum number of students allowed from Fitchburg at Monty Tech?
It fluctuates every year. I think the number's 70,
79.
78. Yeah, 79.
Okay.
How it's calculated is we add up, and this is all in the district agreement that was signed in 1965, how many school-age attending children are in the entire 18 cities and towns in the district. It's about 27,000 this year. First grade through 12, not kindergarten, because in 1965, not every city and town had kindergarten. So the district, we get those numbers off the October 1 reports from all the cities and towns, and then whatever percentage that city or town is of the total number, that's the percentage of seats you get out of the freshman class. So, a simple example, if there was 30,000 school-age attending children in the entire district, and you had 3,000 school-age attending children in your city and town, you would get 10% of the freshman class, which is 350, so you would get 35 seats. If you look on page 5 of the paper I gave you, you can look at Fitchburg and you can see that your capital ownership of the school, if you will, is 23.5%. So you're entitled to 23% of the freshman class. You can see that your operating budget, you're going to pay 30%. That's because you send more students than your quota. We probably took 105 students from Fitchburg last year into the freshman class. So that there's 405 students from Fitchburg at Monty Tech, and if you had multiplied the 78 by 4, it would honestly been less than the 400. So that's why your operating is higher.
So there's a waiting list, I would imagine.
There's 158 students on the waiting list right now. On last Wednesday night, the school committee voted to expand the size of the freshman class by additional students. So they've actually accepted 380 freshmen. Not confident right now that I have enough room for 380. As an educator, I feel bad that I'm leaving anybody on a waiting list who wants to go there, but we can't possibly take anybody. What communities they're going to come from, I don't know, because what happens in the district agreement is after June 1st, those seats go to anybody on the district highest score on the waiting list in first. So the city and town quotas only stay in effect from April 1st to June 1st. Why they go away after June 1st is the practicality of it is we need to fill up the freshman class. And there are 4, if not 5 communities that would never fill the quota. There's just Holden, Sterling, Petersham, Harvard, Princeton do not traditionally fill their quota. And we kept the quotas in till the very end. There would always be empty seats. So that's for practical reasons and outlined in the agreement. So whoever wrote this agreement in 1965 had some pretty good foresight on how everything that was going to work. So after June 1st, all those people that we admitted, there's 5 criteria that we look at on why and how you get a score. 7th and 8th grade attendance, 7th and 8th grade grades, 7th and 8th grade discipline report, recommendation from your sending school guidance counselor, and an interview score from our guidance counselor. 5 criteria, they add up to 100. Minimum cutoff score is a 45 you need for acceptance. So it's a fairly low acceptance score, and it allows someone could struggle in 1, maybe even 2 areas and still get accepted. Minimum cutoff score is 45. In reality, when you have 158 students on the waiting list, in some cities and towns, the cutoff score, the real score to get in was higher. Like, I don't believe we've accepted anybody under a 65 in some communities because they've oversubscribed. There's more applicants than seats. Where in communities that do not fill their quota, a 45 gets you in, because anybody above a 45 from that town gets in. So the town quotas went away last week. There's a list of 158 kids, and first 30 kids, well, there was more than that, because of the 350 we initially offered seats to, then they get a card to return that they want to come. And some of them changed their minds, so as of last week, there was only 308 that actually committed to coming. So it's a rolling admission process. There'll still be kids that decide and accept, and we'll go. If you're on the wait list, it doesn't mean you won't get in, because there are students that we've offered admission to who won't take it or won't show up the first week of school, and then we'll go to the waiting list, call them and ask if you're still interested in coming.
So it's not out of the ordinary, maybe, September 1st, first couple weeks of September, to be filling up?
We even
Cleaning
took
off that
students
waiting
off
list?
the waiting list in January of this year. We still admitted students then too. And you stay on the waiting list all of your year, all this year. So we have applicants who want to come in as sophomores, and we're in the process of interviewing students to come in as sophomore year now too. We'll take some juniors, but we do not take seniors, and the reason is we're certifying that you know a trade. So a minimum of 2 years in that trade is, unless you're a transfer from another vocational school. So if you're not in by, rule of thumb we've been using, the first warning period of junior year, we won't accept you, we won't take you in. You got to be in the trade.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Got 158 on the waiting list. Do we know how many are from Fitchburg?
Well,
Yeah.
we had 199 apply for Fitchburg, 79 accepted. But to give you some insight, we had 645 applications for 350, 60 seats. 645. And just to let you know, other communities are in the same situation. They'd love to have more students in there. For example, Gardner had 101, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my latest numbers, 101 apply, only 39 accepted. They'd love to send another 70 or so. 69 from Athol applied, 26 accepted. 6 from Phillipson, they only have 4 seats. So
I guess what I'm looking at, Mark, is that the percentages that then go out the window, last week, did you say?
Yep.
And then you go to the best student. I guess my question is, because Fitchburg has a bigger population, has more students apply, the average, as you said, might be 65, whereas sometimes it might be 45 if they don't have many kids applying. When you're then going and just from that waiting list, not going percentage-wise from the cities and just going to the best students out of your 5 criteria, does that not in some way weight it towards a town that still has a lot of percentage of theirs that go there, but doesn't have as many students apply because their next tier kids would be higher up, the ones who didn't initially get accepted?
In sheer numbers, Fitchburg probably has the most amount of students on the waiting list. But by percentage, many of the towns actually have more of their school-age attending children on the waiting list than Fitchburg. What I mean by that, I'll give you Royalston as an example. 80% of Royalston's 8th graders, and I know it's not a large number, but 80% of their 8th graders applied for admission to Monty Tech. So by percentage, they have, and what do we take from 3 kids from Royalston or something like that? Yeah, 3. So they by percentage have a far greater number sitting there on the waiting list. Sheer numbers, Fitchburg, because it's a bigger, it's the biggest community that's sending students to Monty Tech.
the numbers are smaller, but they're higher in percentage.
Yes.
And they're huge compared to ours.
The school committee has looked at that same question a number of times. Because what happens after June 1st, the policy, the district agreement says, is determined by school committee policy. So the school committee has looked at it a number of times about, keeping quotas in effect after June 1st. But with communities that still aren't filling their quota, they've tried a number of different scenarios. And,
Yep.
theoretically ran the numbers and so on. And it didn't have a great impact. 2 years ago, this was really kind of a big issue with the school committee. So the guidance department ran the scenario of what would happen, and the percentages on the waiting list more or less reflect the
Reflected.
percentages of who's applying anyway. So it was pretty equal distribution. So
I guess I asked the question from two perspectives. One is I want to make sure that Fitchburg, because that's our responsibility, gets as many students in and gets treated equally and fairly in the distribution of the slots. And I guess the second component of that, which is a double-edged sword, because I certainly commend you, your staff, the school committee, on the job that you guys do at Monty Tech. I think it's spectacular. I think you give a great education. You give wonderful opportunity to a lot of kids in this and surrounding communities. But by the same token, have we, by creating that system, and I know it's pretty lean, and there's ways to get in. What are we doing with the kid? When I was in high school, some of the kids who struggled went to vocational school because they could not succeed in the regular school. And now vocational school has risen the bar so high. I'm not sure, and that's not a fault of yours. I'm just throwing out there that have we created this thing that there's more of a chance for that student to get lost because he doesn't have the opportunity? And would there be some way to look at that?
I think there is definitely a void of students who don't get into Monty Tech and who might not find the appropriate program in one of the sending high schools. It's not just a Fitchburg issue. We have a significant waiting list from Gardner, Winchton, Athol, who would love to send us more students. The raising of the bar couldn't be helped. Our students have to pass the exact same test that students from Fitchburg High. So there's no question that vocational education has changed. The scope of the trade areas have changed, and what's required for a student, the amount of they have to be. The notion that we'll send them up to the VOC and they can learn a trade and work with their hands doesn't really apply to the same way it did when you and I were looking at vocational schools. It's still there. And we can still learn somebody can still learn a trade and make a great living, but the academic component has to be there. The state's mandated that for us.
Thank you.
We have expanded. We had a $15 million expansion not too long ago. The school committee has discussed, we'd love to accept the 645 applications, but do you want us to bond out for a $30 million expansion? From what I've told, there's a bubble coming through the system that's not going to be there in a year. By the time we pour cement and get the building up, they're gone.
We're not eligible for SBA money because of the bond that was used to build the last edition. It's a 10-year waiting period before you could even apply for an SBA. And we have tried to, the school has over 1,300 students. It has never been that big. We're trying to take every kid, and if we do this, we could easily approach 1,400 next year. So we're trying to take every child that we can. We are using every square foot of that building that we can. We're taking non-essential things like storage areas and putting it out into unheated warehouses. Any conditioned space in the building is being used for classrooms. And why we're expanding the capacity of some of the shop areas. And that's what really dictates, our class size. There are requirements because our students are actually working an apprenticeship, if you will. So there's state guidelines on student-teacher ratio when they're in the trade, and the square footage guidelines, so how many students I can actually put into a plumbing shop per plumbing teacher. So then we build the capacity of the school from the capacity of the 20 trades.
Thank you.
Councilor Joseph?
Can you tell me how many seniors you had graduate this year?
303.
How many of those were from Fitchburg?
I don't have that. We have to report on the class. I don't have a breakdown by class, but glad to get it to you.
And you said you had 300 and some odd students that you were starting this year as freshmen. So basically, what kind of a turnover do you have of students from freshman to senior?
303 graduated this year.
This year,
Yeah.
303 graduated this year, and we're accepting.
I just look at the Fitchburg Public Schools, and this is from the days when I was on the school committee, and usually there's 100% turnover from the time they go from kindergarten to 12th grade. They're different kids. Very few of the kids are the same that started.
Transitional population.
Go up, and even in high school, a guidance counselor at the high school has a file cabinet that's about this long of all of the students that they've had if they're like the senior class, but this is how many students are actually graduating because there's been such a rollover. You don't have
Yeah,
that.
not every student, obviously, that starts with us as a freshman goes on to graduate, and we do, as I told some of you, we will accept sophomores and juniors to fill that in. So off the top of my head, I don't know the percentage of how many spend 4 years with us. Could be as low as 70%, or they're all 4 years. That seems to be a number that's sticking in my head. And we do lose traditionally after the freshman year. You know, for some students, it's an extremely long bus ride. You know, if you're from Barry, and you know, our first bus pickup is 5:30, 6:45. The kid really needs to be at the bus stop at 5:30 because the bus is going to, or leave his house at 5:30, so he's at that bus stop for 5:45. And then they ride to school, go to school. If they're in one of the outside trades, then they're in a van out to a project, back to school on a bus. Or if they play a sport, you know, and they take the late bus at 6 o'clock, they're getting back in their house at like 8 o'clock at night, or 7 o'clock, so, you know, eat supper. So there are kids who decide that's just not for them. It's competitive to get into Monty Tech, and then it's competitive to get the trade you want once you're there. There's only so many slots in each trade. They go through an exploratory process freshman year and compete basically for trades. And so you don't get your first choice. You might stick it out for your freshman year, but at the end of freshman year you decide, you know, I really wanted plumbing and I got electrical and I don't want it. I'm going to go back to my sending schools. And with 18 cities and towns, it is a pretty transient, it can be a transient population. I mean, there's letters, you know, I'm constantly sending letters to the area superintendents of people, because we have to notify each other when somebody moves out of district or moves from one town to another, because they were in Gardner and now they're in Fitchburg, or were in Fitchburg, vice versa. So, you know, I signed quite a few of those. So it is, the population does move around. But I know that our dropout rate was the second lowest dropout rate in Northern Worcester County. It was Oakmont and then Monty Tech. So as far as purely dropping out of school, it's very low, 3.9%. But there is, I'm going to guess maybe 70% have been with us for all 4 years.
I find that commendable because, like I said, in the Fitchburg school system, it's very difficult because it's more public school. It's very difficult to end the senior year with the same students that you started in freshman class. So that's just a comment.
I think we have an advantage, so, you know, that it's difficult. Even though it's 1,300 students, we break them down into 20 smaller schools once they get there. So the staff really gets to know them. They get to know the staff. It's really an extra set of eyes on whether a kid is struggling or something. So, you know, you hear phrases in education like a school within a school or smaller learning environments. Vocational education has been doing that since the inception. So I think it gives us an advantage.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much. We will now move to the Fitchburg schools. Superintendent Ravenel, Mr. Reynolds, welcome. Thank you. The floor is yours for your opening statements. mission statement, etc. And we'll do some questions, I'm sure.
What I'd like just to do before I turn it over to Andre is just say a couple of quick words. Obviously, thank you all for your close and careful consideration of the budget when we move it. I want to recognize all the hard work that went into this, moving people, a lot of teamwork to make it happen. And I also want to just say to you that in terms of just sitting here physically and with the other school committee members in the chamber, that we're just here physically to show you that we support this budget. So with that short introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Rabbit to take you through the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Good evening to everybody, all the city councilors. Glad to be here. This is the first time that I'm here, and I had a warm-up act come out before me. Jim did a great job. We have a great relationship. He's part of our team of superintendents that get together on a regular basis. I've gotten all kinds of feedback as I've talked with different counselors about how long or how short the presentation should be. It sounds like I've got to tell you that the shorts are winning over the long. That's how the survey and the poll is coming in. So there are a couple things that I just want to kind of read, because I think I see this as a presentation not just to the City Council, and clearly we've had other kinds of hearings, but really this is a chance for me to communicate with the whole community. So it is a little bit redundant for you because you've had this, should have had this for about a week now, but there are some salient points that I made in my introduction that I would like to read. The delivered value of public education is so much more difficult to measure than some other public services. While our staff prepares our city's students to read and write and imbues in them a sense of civic pride and responsibility, there's no way to measure the full value that a healthy school system brings to the community. Beyond academics, our staff comforts when students are mourning, reassures when students are frightened or confused, encourages when students are struggling, and rejoices when students are happy and successful. We are a society that lives in the present and values the immediate. It is hard to nurture an appreciation for the invisible miracles that happen in our classrooms every day and the impact that these will have on our country's future. A competent and caring staff in safe and well-equipped classrooms brings stability to our students and to their lives, and contributes to a healthier home environment and to a healthier community. With that, I've enclosed the school department's recommended budget for FY09. This budget's been prepared in a collaborative process, and the budget, unlike previous years, is based on actual and not projected revenues. In order to achieve this, we used three different categories of process. One was to reduce certain segments of the budget. The other was to retain certain segments of the budget, and then to reorganize. So what's taken place during this collaborative process with my administrators is really looking at every component of the budget and seeing if there are things that aren't working or don't have to work any longer, and reducing those from the budget. Then looking and seeing if there are things that we need, things that have not been funded in the past or have not been done in the past, and that as a school district we absolutely have to do. So you'll see that there are additions in this budget as well as things that have been subtracted. And then there's also a good deal of reorganization that has taken place. And that has been something that I have done since I have come here. So for the past 3 years, you've seen a budget placed before you that did not simply take the budget that existed before and then move it over, but you would see things leave and things come in based on the different goals of the school district. Just as the vision statement, Counselor, you asked about the vision statement, and this is one that was formed when I came here with my administrative team. Each Fitchburg public school provides learning experiences that engages all students in achieving high academic standards while developing intellectual rigor, creative interest, and the social characteristics that prepare them for the challenges of living successfully and productively as citizens of this country. And then the other key piece that was used in formulating this budget are the district goals. And there are 5 of those. A district-wide focus on increased student performance through building school community in a rigorous academic environment, goal number 1. To increase school attendance and decrease the dropout rate, which we have been doing over the past 3 years. To increase parent outreach and communication, and especially in an area of multilingual parent outreach. 4th, a well-prepared, collaborative, and engaged administrative team, and that's how all the decisions have been made in this budget and the way the decisions are made in the district. And then finally, and this is the new one, and that is technology, a focus on technology and infrastructure, which has been sorely overlooked and not taken care of over the years, and we've made some changes in that area. So with that, I could go through all of these slides. You've had an opportunity to look through all of them. And in going over them myself, I saw that there were some that were more self-explanatory. There were others that might have needed a little bit of explanation. So I've whittled that down to just focus on the slides that talk about what was retained, what was taken out, and what was reorganized. And just focus on those 3 components, because some of it is not self-evident and required so would require some questions. And the first of those is the enrollment decline, which I think is an important component, because the enrollment decline, when you look at somewhere in my original letter, it says that there's been a net loss of 20 positions. So when everything is said and done, things put in, things taken out, things reorganized. When all of that is done, there's a net loss of 20 fewer bodies working in the schools. Now, some of that has been related to the decreases that we've had to make in certain components of the budget. But a lot of it was related to the fact that we have 280 fewer students. So really, pretty much whatever we would be doing, we would be looking at a reduction of staff. So that's a key number, is the 280. And we're looking that we've probably seen the biggest decrease right now, and it's going to level off. We're looking at our kindergarten. Last year, we took a real hit on that kindergarten enrollment. This year, it's looking that it's going to remain kind of stable. So I don't see a precipitous drop, but I do see that there'll be some reductions. And world events and economic events, and as we've seen, housing events, impact our student population much more than they may in another community. So one of the slides says recommended staff additions. So let me talk about that. One of them is a substitute line item for $150,000. And that is a line item, if you've ever worked or had anything to do in the schools, that is always underfunded and always over budget, because it's an unanticipated situation. We have teachers who go out on long-term illnesses, and we need to provide substitutes. You can't predict that. You can't predict illness. You can't predict how many people are going to be out for one reason or another. So this year, that was an underfunded line item, which was part of the deficit that I had to address in January. We're funding that with an additional 150 to try to forestall that kind of a situation next year. B.F. Brown, because of their enrollment increase, needed an additional enrichment teacher. B.F. Brown and South Street are both getting half of a guidance counselor because of the enrollment. Memorial, because of an increase in enrollment, needs another science teacher. So that's there as an addition. All Dead is our alternative evening program. You're all familiar with it. We've got an enrollment there, and what has been added to the expectation of the high school curriculum now is a science MCAS test. So we needed to beef up the science delivery in the Alt Ed program, and that represents that and the para. And then the last one relates to goal number 5, and that's a technology director. We have all the schools, all the computers, all the technology we have, and we do not have a technology director. We have a teacher who oversees all of our technology. And right now, I mean, just to take care of Crocker's technology alone is going to take a full-time person. If you read the article in the paper, the principal there and the staff are getting donations of technology hand over fist, which is a great thing. But as you can imagine, all of that is very complex. So those are additions that were made and the justification for them in terms of staff. In terms of non-staff additions is a slide that talks about test evaluation, $45,000. For 3 years, we've paid for all of our testing evaluation through grants. The grant is gone. We cannot stop testing our students. So these are Galileo and other kinds of tests that are given throughout the year to create benchmarks so that you test the child, you get the results. This is all done in-house, but we have to buy the software and all the technology needed to do it. But what we do on a regular basis is we test students at many, many, many points throughout the year. We get the data back, the data goes right into the hands of the teacher analyzes their students, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then is able to adjust and start working individually. SPED legal is self-explanatory, additional legal costs in the SPED department. Technology contracts. We have just finished. First of all, we just got Comcast high-speed internet in January. So we've just come into the world that everyone else has been in for years. With that came a new data system, which we funded totally through a Microsoft rebate of about $400,000 that we got, as it was a class action suit against Microsoft, and we got about $400,000. So all of our infrastructure and everything for X2 is the name of this data system, was paid for that way, and now we have a contract cost each year to maintain it. Everything we send to the Department of Education must be sent electronically. We had no way to gather our data from school to school except SneakerNet. We would go from one school to the next and gather all the data, bring it back to one place, analyze it, run it through. If there were mistakes, somebody had to go back out to the school. So starting in April, we went live with X2. The yearly cost of that is $80,000. I'll jump to the next page quickly, which has me reducing our staff by 2 secretaries. The moving to a data delivery of all of this information has lessened the role of our clerks and our secretaries. So we went to technology, which is supposed to be the promise of being able to do things quicker, more efficient, and that did do that. So by going to technology to do that, we've reduced our staff by 2 secretaries. The salary of those 2 secretaries is what's paying for that line item of the technology contracts. The NEASC is the high school accreditation, and you have to put about $20,000 over a 2-year period to do everything needed for the accreditation. That means just feeding people, copying, putting them up, all of those kinds of expenses. Translations, one of the feedback that we got from the coordinated program review from the Department of Education is we need to translate more of our documents. We've come a long way. We're translating most of our documents now, but we need to do more. Athletics, there has never been a line item in there for athletics. We've been running our athletic program on a shoestring, a sneaker string, a sneaker lace, and our kids need it. And this is a definite, absolute commitment of the whole staff to the athletic program. And what I want to digress on with this is this was done with all of the administrators around the table. So when $35,000 went into this budget to fund athletics, given the cuts we made in other areas, every principal said, yes, I want to fund athletic. Yes, I want to fund athletics. The Title I director, anyone at the table. And that's how this budget was put together. And if that group had said, as a group, we do not believe we should fund 1 penny more of athletics, that would not be in there. And the person who held his breath through a whole month of budget negotiations was Ray Cosenza. And the one meeting he missed, he called right away and said, I probably lost my money because I wasn't there. And I said, no, it's not about whether you show up or not. It's about whether the people around the table are committed to what you're doing, so you don't have to be sitting in your seat. Utility increases, we're all looking at those, and transportation increases, and we're all going to be crossing our fingers.
That's it.
In terms of the recommended non-staff reductions, again, all of these were recommended by the administrative team, and then we also don't do a majority vote in this process. It's consensus. So we stay around the table until everyone around the table is comfortable with what we're doing. Putting in, taking out, reorganizing. So it's not raise your hand, 8 for, 3 against. Because my experience of that is the 3 against, they're going to be against for the rest of the year. They're going to walk away with a bitter taste in their mouth, and what this hopes and tries to do, and I think it's accomplished in the past 3 years, especially last year when we had to cut $3 million in 45 positions, when everyone left that room, the answer was, are you comfortable with this? Can you live with this? And the answer from everyone was yes. So we've reduced our longevity account, and that's from a prediction that we've gotten in terms of how much it's going to cost us for our retirees, by $30,000. We reduced the textbook account by $18,000. You should have seen in your munis budget that each school has its own textbook account. The high school has $26,000 in a textbook account. Memorial has $10,000 in a textbook account. I did not dictate that to the schools. What we did this year, and this is for the first time, we redid the whole per pupil allocations for the schools. Over the years, some was taken, some was put, some was taken, some was put. And then, so you start out here, but then you took some off, you put some on, so you get here 5 years later, and you've got people who have more money than they have students, and you've got people who have less money, but their enrollment has gone up. So we went back with the administrators, we set a per pupil amount, and we redistributed all the discretionary money by school, by per pupil. So if you had more pupils, you got more money. 3 schools had their per pupil go down. Other schools got more because it hadn't been adjusted. So if your per pupil gave you $68,000 to the high school, that amount went to the high school, and the principal, working with their school council, decided where it goes. Does it go into textbooks? Does it go into supplies? Does it go into professional development? So when you look at the individual pages of the munis documents for each school, the principal and the school council decided how to spend that. Not me, not the central office. And so this $22,000 is going to be for district-wide needs that could come up. The other thing that's very new now, there's a system in place now for line item transfers, so that at any time during the year, if a need should arise, a school committee member, a principal, a school says, we're looking at what we need to do, and we need additional funds for textbooks or materials, then they would bring that to the administrative council. I would bring it to the school committee, and there's a form and everything in place that says, I'd like to transfer $10,000 from this account to this account in order to meet the needs of materials or textbooks. Capital, that was actually an amount that was in there. I can't now remember what it was, but it was a line item that had been added 2 or 3 years ago, and we just reduced it as we moved all the capital and maintenance to the maintenance budget. The personnel was reduced by $10,000, general supplies by $5,000, and then rental and lease equipment. And the ability to reduce there is that we had a lot of our Xerox leases are up. So that first year, you get some real breaks because it's part of the contract. So we looked at all of our commitments to lease and Xerox and realized that we were, for this year, we're able to come down by $20,000. And then finally, the recommended reductions in staff. We had 2 open custodial positions, which we're not going to fill. The city funding, some of you may remember this, the city funding for the nurse was in the school budget. So it's being taken out of the school budget. So it's not a reduction of a human being, it's the reduction of the equivalent of a nurse's salary from the school budget. The other nurse, because we have 2 pilot schools, they had 2 nurses for the 2 pilot schools, Academy and FAA. As autonomous schools, they can decide whether they want 2 nurses or 1 nurse. They chose to have 1 nurse serving the 2 schools, which are both located at Academy. So that reduced our nurse staff by 1. Now, that person, most recently, we realized, is not going to actually lose her job, even though we'll have one nurse fewer, because we just got a head nurse funded through a grant. So one of our nurses is moving to that grant-funded head nurse, and then this other nurse who would have been RIF has a position, but there's one fewer nurse in the school district. The 8 teachers are mostly related to drop-in enrollment. The 3 kindergarten paras, 3 of the classes that we reduced were kindergarten classes. Every one of our kindergartens has a teacher and a full-time para. So, and they used to be 5-hour paras. Last year we moved them up to 6 hours. Now they're 6 hours. So we're reducing our classrooms by 3 kindergartens. So if you're reducing by 3 kindergartens, you can reduce 3 paras. But all the other kindergartens will still have full-time paras like they did. The 2 secretaries I spoke about, and then the SPED staff cuts are cuts that are being made as we're reorganizing special education deliveries. You know, I had a panic call from a parent, a special education parent, who wanted to meet with me. And she saw $533,000 in special needs cuts, and of course everybody's concerned, if you're the parent of a special education child, is this going to impact me? And the program that her child was in was not going to be impacted at all. So she came in quite nervous, quite shaken, and walked away knowing that her child was in a program that was going to be fully taken care of. So the 533 that you see there is totally reorganization. So that's kind of that's the shortest that I could do to run through it, kind of give you the highlights, and pretty much hit the pages that probably would have what's that or what's that question. So now I'm available for any questions you may have, Councilor.
Thank you. Before we entertain questions, Superintendent Ravenel, I just think I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the people, your support services that are here tonight, which is testimony to the job that you're doing. Assistant Superintendent Giaquinto is here, Business Manager Tom Shagru, and school committee members Glenn Capone, Tom Russo, Sally Cragen, and Attorney Connors. Welcome, and thank you for being here and showing the interest in the school. And, of course, the chairman of the school committee, Mayor Wong. Questions begin with Councilor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. President. This first question is, does this budget meet the net school spending requirement?
Yes, it does.
What is the average per student cost from this budget? Do we know?
Per pupil?
Yeah.
I don't have that as one of my prepared items.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I'd like to thank you for presenting an excellent budget in the presentation. I think the addition and subtractions and reorganization component of it is something that we all need to see, and helps us understand what it is you're doing and what you're trying to attempt. The projections and goals are excellent and also very helpful. I guess a couple direct questions. One is, the mayor has indicated to us that in the future she'd like to present 2, I don't know if they're going to be separate, but a budget with 2 separate portions. One would be for operations and one would be for capital improvements. Is the school committee looking towards, or have you thought of trying to do that in any manner because of the problems we've run into the last few years with the buildings? Jim?
I would just ask you, relative to the budget, when we say capital does not go into the school committee budget. So if you're asking, are capital items in this budget, the answer is no, because capital items end up on the city side. But if you're asking, is the school committee or the school department working towards kind of getting a list together to kind of prioritize things of that nature?
Yes.
I would say to you that probably couldn't pull a definite list out, but through the subcommittees that we have, that's something that we're going to be getting.
Working towards that.
Right.
Excellent. Second question, I guess, has to do with the special ed component of the budget. What percentage does that?
About 17.
About 17% of the budget is for special ed. How many students, percentage-wise, are in special education programs?
19 or so? Yeah, probably 19%.
Okay, so that equates. Sure.
It's about 19% in-house, and then there's a percentage of out-of-district special education students. And the costs there are very individualized, and that's a very expensive set of students.
That's what I was going to get. The out-of-district students, do we receive any compensation back from the state?
Yeah, over a certain percentage. If the cost exceeds a certain percentage, we get what's called circuit breaker. So we get money back from the state to help with that overage. If something is $85,000 or $100,000, we pay a certain percentage, and then the circuit breaker comes back to help meet that tuition.
Is that level for the circuit breaker appropriate? And
No, it's...
Thank you, Paula.
This is actually one of the things that the Superintendent's Association is trying to do. There are areas, and one of them is this circuit breaker. The other one is special education transportation. You know, unlike a regional, a school district receives no funding for transportation.
right, I guess my point is that this council, in many deliberations over the last 6 months, has talked about unfunded mandates from the state.
Yeah.
And in reality, these two components of special education are unfunded mandates from the state.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that when we, as a body, talk about unfunded mandates and ask our representative and ask our state senators to address that, that they work as diligently to address that component within your budget, because it really offsets you and limits you into what you can do for our students. And ultimately, we want to give them the best education available and get the best value for every dollar, and those two areas really crimp that.
And I got to say, Representative Di Natale calls me a lot and says, what about this? What about this? How would this affect you? How would that affect you? So that's part of a conversation that's been ongoing. And for example, McKinney-Vento, which is homeless mandate, that we are to educate the homeless. All of these are wonderful things that we need as a society to do. But what people don't know is that McKinney-Vento says that if a child is in one town and moves to another town, we have to continue to provide the transportation from that new town back to our town. Now, the philosophy is that the life of a child who's homeless is so bad and so disturbed and disrupted and devastated that what do you want to do? Provide the most stability you can provide. So if they're in a school system and for some reason by the state or some other reason they have to move 50 miles away, I have to find the money in my budget now to provide the transportation for that child back to Fitchburg. And we split it 50-50 with the town that they move to. So best of intention, absolutely necessary, but another example of an unfunded mandate.
I just wanted to get those things out there. Thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to congratulate you on a fantastic job with your commencement speech the other night. You handled both languages quite well.
I was hoping somebody would give me feedback on the Spanish part, so.
Sounded good.
Okay.
And the other teachers that I was sitting with thought it was good, too. And I'm just going to take your word for it that it was the same as the English portion. I guess the first question I want to ask, and I've got a few, $18,000 reduction in books compared to a $35,000 increase in athletics. And you mentioned how you came to that conclusion with administrators all sitting in a room. I taught in the Fitchburg public school system. I almost find it hard to believe that administrators would agree, especially elementary school administrators, that textbooks can take a cut. You have a lot of students, I'm sure, especially at the younger elementary school age, that can be out of school for extended periods of time. And they don't have any materials with them. And then, of course, I mean, I played sports every single season throughout high school. I would be curious where that money went. As to, is it funding more high school sports? Are we talking about more implementation of middle school sports, elementary school sports? Could you explain how those two came about?
Absolutely. First of all, they were all sitting in the room, and they weren't drugged. And they heard the conversation, and they saw that. Now remember that they have their own school line items for textbooks and materials. Also, there are very few textbooks used in the elementary schools. I can't really think of too many at all. That the elementary education now is a very materials-driven process. So, as opposed to the textbooks, and that's where the big cost is in the textbooks. We're starting to get to. We've talked about the selection of a new science textbook at the middle school level. We haven't finalized one yet. That would be the expense for that. The high school, they have almost $30,000 in their textbook account, and then the other schools also have replacements. So we have vetted this out. We went around the room many, many times, and when it came from one to the other, they really felt that the money that we had there, we were going to be able to do what was needed with that amount of money. But I will, that's why I left open that door to say, as we move through, people are not bashful in going to the school committee with their needs. I have a very active school committee. So no one is shy about approaching them about issues. So I think the fact that we're kind of putting this one out there as, as a topic is one where if a school council or one of the groups at school feels that there's something that's being missed, then, we will address it. We just received $500,000 in reading materials over the past couple of years, all through grants. So all of the reading materials that are in our elementary schools from K to 4 are done. Phenomenal reading opportunities, and one of the things I was going to talk about is that the new Commissioner of Education, if you read in the paper, is coming here on Friday, and he's going to the high school to see what's going on there, and then he's going to Crocker Elementary and wants to go into one of our full-day kindergarten classes. Because I told him last week that our kindergartners are reading. They've been in kindergarten for a full year, and they're actually reading. So that's one piece. If we compare our athletic program with most communities of kind, we are doing our kids a disservice. We have pretty much eliminated all middle school athletic opportunities. This is a chance to try to put some of that back. One of the things you saw in my letter to you is, if there's anything anyone knows about me by now, it's I believe in a comprehensive educational program. I don't believe in eliminating sports. I don't believe in eliminating music. I don't believe in eliminating honors and AP courses. You have to have something for every kid. Our kids need, what our athletic program will give them. Not just so that they can play on a baseball team. It's all the things that I have 2 kids who play sports. I'm more happy about all the other things they're learning playing sports than I am about the fact that my son's a great baseball player, by the way. But he's learning how to work with other people. He's learning about teams. He's learning that he's got to budget his time. If he is playing a sport, he's got to do his homework. So I think this was a real commitment from the part of all the other administrators to say, this is an important part of our kids' lives. Next year, they might decide something different and say, you know what, that's not where we want to put the money. But it's clearly been on the table right along. We fund most of our sports programs through fundraising, by the way. And so if you have a bad year fundraising, you have to cut programs. For the past 2 years, I've had to cut athletic programs in December, which means that there was some kid who had been looking forward to playing sports in the spring, and it was gone. And there's really the rec program here does a phenomenal job, and the new initiative by PALS, the police force, they've done some incredible work with our kids in track and most recently in football. But my view is, this is my job. This is our job to offer a comprehensive program. And when I cut something from the budget or I can't run a sport, I'm thinking, what kid was it who was just coming to school every day because track was something that he or she could excel in? So I'll be back here next year, and I'm not sure where we could be, with the athletic budget, but that would be my answer.
Thank you for explaining that. I was noticing that total overall with athletics, it's a $55,000 increase overall from last year. You added, was there already going to be $20,000 increase? I believe it's on page 17 in your...
Of the munis budget?
Yes. Along with a 18 almost $19,000 increase for your AD.
The AD salary is, yeah, can you answer
That was a
that?
shift out of the revolving account into the budget.
So that was money that was in the revolving account? So now it's in the athletic budget. One of the things we've been doing over the past 3 years is there were monies that were in kind of group line items that we're actually paying for other things. So over the past 3 years, what I've been trying to do, if you went back and saw a Munis document from 3 years ago, it had maybe 75% of these line items. Transportation was all mixed in. All dead was mixed into the high school. And what I've done is pull those out, and they have pages of their own. So the explanation on the 18715 is there was this number called the revolving account. It actually was supporting the athletic program, but it was in the revolving account. We moved it this year into the actual page for athletics. And this has been something that I've been working with the school committee on. So that what the amount that's the increase that is actually new to the budget is the 35,000.
Okay, I see.
The other was there, but it was in another account. So if you were looking for it, you wouldn't know that there was another $18,000 in the athletic account. Now you know that it's there because it's been moved out of that into here.
So if I was looking at fiscal year '07 budget, it would be more comparable to this year than it would have been last year.
Right, well, if you look at the 76,947,
Yep.
somewhere that 18,000 was somewhere else in the budget. But it was paying for athletics, but it wasn't in the athletic munis, so now it is.
Thank you for clearing that one up.
Yeah.
Is there still user fees?
Yes, there are.
Are there accommodations made for
Yes.
those?
It's based on totally the free and reduced lunch. So if there's somebody who's receiving free lunch, they don't pay, which is also what our fundraising pays for. And we don't turn anyone away.
I know that. What is it roughly? Is it very
$50 per,
Per-
it's 50 per sport, right?
Now, Councilor Hay brought up cost per student. Is there a state total that you follow every year, as far as we've got to spend X amount of money on each particular student, or
No, we go net school spending.
net school spending?
Which is that page, there's a page in here that kind of breaks down net school spending.
Okay,
Um,
you don't need to go through that. I do remember.
I want to say
seeing
our
it.
per pupil is probably 65, it's around 65. Yeah.
Any idea how that compares to other communities surrounding us? Or I see Jim kind of wanting to answer that.
I would just say to you that we need to understand that there's a formula that the state uses to determine what our spending needs to be, that school spending number. Now, I think last year was like $9,600. I think this year it's maybe a little north of $10,000 per head, just on average. So you multiply that out and get to a big number. But the point is that when you kind of come down and look at individual schools, it doesn't mean that every single student, it means on average, every single student has it, but it doesn't mean that the children of Jim Reynolds necessarily have that expenditure, because every single student, what's equitable is not to have the same amount of money spent on everybody. What's equitable is to have every single child's needs met. In those needs vary in dollar amounts. So one student might have a little bit more money spent on them, one student might have a little bit less, but on average, it works out to be the state average.
Well, and an $85,000 tuition is part of that average. That's part of the budget. So you get, what's that? Yeah, the special education. So you get 5 or 6 of those, and you can see how your per pupil is definitely thrown off.
I do. You mentioned loss of 20 staff, and you have 280 fewer students, yet there's almost a $2 million increase. Is that, again, going back to revolving accounts?
No, actually, it's, if you go back to the additions, if you just look at the increase that was put in for energy.
So that's covering our cost of living, I guess you could say.
Well, it's, first of all, you move over all of the salaries, and then, you can find that line that's recommended. So the staff additions alone okay, were 435,000. That's on page 28. And the recommended other non-staff additions is 575,000. So right there, you've got $1 million. And every 1% increase in salary is 350, about 350,000.
Okay.
And generally, the increases have been 2%, and that's not counting health increases.
Which is a big problem citywide. And one more question for you. I don't want to monopolize too much time, but you still have to as far as Title I goes,
Yeah.
you still have to service the private schools, parochial schools. Is that correct?
Yes.
How many students do we have receiving from Fitchburg in the private schools that we service?
I don't have that number, but that's a number, Counselor, that I can get for you.
I'd be curious to know that because, and also, it seems like we also serve it with the parochial schools and nurse also, coming out of the school budget now, no longer the Board of Health budget, where it was before.
It's not, no, now it's in the city budget.
It's in the city budget now, okay.
That's been an ongoing, activity that we've been working on, and it is out of the school budget, and it is in the city budget. But for years, it was in the school budget. And page 20, I broke down one grant to kind of help people understand.
That's where private
Yeah,
school faculty
right.
costs on page 7.
A certain percentage, right, on page 7. And I took I took a big grant, and I said, here's how a grant gets divided. Because I think if you don't see this all the time, you're thinking, well, it all goes to teacher salaries. So some of it is actually set aside, that you have to put a certain amount of the grant aside to meet any particular needs that are dictated by that particular activity. And then you can see private school faculty costs $15,000. Just about any of all of the federal grants require a certain amount of money that needs to go to the private schools. And also, we provide the transportation for private schools, which I don't think everyone is aware of, and for charter schools. So all of those things come out of the local school district budget.
Sometimes it amazes me, but thank you very much for clearing all those things up, Jim and Mr. Avenel.
Councilor Tran?
Thank you, Mr. President. Superintendent, when you made that comment about asking the administrators one thing that they all wanted, and they all raised their hands saying that they wanted more funding for the athletic department. And when you said that, I shook my head in disbelief.
No. Well, then you misunderstood me. That's not the question that was asked. So, maybe you
But
want to clarify
anyhow, I'm looking at the athletics account, and the athletics coaching line item went up by 18.8%, translating to $35,000. The program director position went up to 19.6%, close to $19,000, and all these line items add up to close to $56,000. Now, I believe, I'm an advocate for athletics, but my priority is to educate the students first and foremost. It's a disbelief to know that none of the administrators raised their hands and say that I want more funding for textbooks, I want more fundings for classroom supplies. It's just incomprehensible to me.
Can
So
I
that's my
clarify
comments
statement?
towards-
Because I think, I didn't put it that way. It wasn't like our first priority is going to be athletics. The way it is that each department and each school brings its interests to the table. And then everybody goes around it. We had this number that we had to come to, 46 million. So people would either say this stays or this goes. There's a lot that ended up on the floor. And as we kept going around and around, and everybody putting in their card, you were able to put in a card to say, you know what, the athletic program, that goes. And so what I'm saying is, the way I do the process, everybody walks away with something. It's a very different budget process than people are used to. You know, people are used to a process of, I just go to the table and I know what I want and I only want what I want. You know, and unless I get it, I'm going to go away angry. What I've been trying to do over the past 3 years is develop a different way of looking at things and try to get everyone to see through the other person's eyes in terms of what their program is, so that everybody doesn't walk away with everything, but everybody walks away with a good amount of what they're looking for. And you may be right. You know, there may have been a lot of sentiment that was not expressed that would have said that athletic money is not worth it. But the school committee actually grilled my administrators and said, okay, come on, guys, you know, we can send the superintendent out of the room and you can tell us what you really think. And they said, well, we can tell you what we really think with the superintendent here, because we're part of the process. So it's odd.
Did you at least received one card from an administrator saying that he or she wanted more funding for textbooks and classroom supplies?
I honestly can say no. And I probably can say no because when they looked at their budgets, there were a couple of schools that had been underfunded in terms of textbooks and materials for 4 or 5 years because the per pupil had never been adjusted. So when we were, for example, South Street Elementary and what other school got a huge bump? I can't remember now. 2 schools got a bump of like $4,000 or $5,000 of additional money when we actually did a per pupil calculation. B.F. Brown took a hit of $3,000 less. So I put the formula, I said, here's what you have. And if I do this formula, here's what you're going to have. Some of you are going to get more. It's kind of biblical. Some of you are going to get less. What do you want to do? Stay here, which is, if you ask me how to explain where you got your money, I couldn't tell you. Or go here, where we all know that it's based on how many kids you have and a per pupil amount. And everybody said, we're going to go here, because they knew that once we did that once, we now are moving on and everybody's getting a portion of the funds that's equal to the number of students that they have.
I talk to a lot of teachers because I have kids in the school system, and I can tell you one thing. I cannot name one teacher that tells me they don't need textbook or classroom supplies for the classroom. It tells me 2 things with this budget. One, either the administrators are not communicating with the teachers, or 2, the administrators have their priorities wrong. So
There's a third
that's
one,
what we're
and
saying.
that is that the staff are not communicating with their administrators. Because I have people say to me all the time, I bought this, I bought that. And when I say to them, did you ask the principal? 75% of the time they say no. And I say, well, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to interject here. Councilor Tran, also as a parent with children inside the system. What I would say to you is that there may be a breakdown of communication in different places, and that's certainly quite possible. But I can sit here and feel comfortable with the budget, even though there may be some line items that might at first blush appear to be, a question. But I have the comfort in knowing that if there is an issue, and if people are communicating with the people within their chain of command, that the request to go and change something is quite is available to people. So if we find that there is a need, if we find new information tomorrow that's not available to us today, and we sit at this table speaking to you, then if it's the right thing to do to go and change it, we'll go and change it.
That's good to know, as long as there's an open communication between the school committee and teachers and the front office and teachers. Second question regarding transportation. We're spending close to $3.5 million on transportation. Can you give us a status on the busing contract situation?
We've not finalized the busing contract. The numbers are astounding, as you can well imagine, as they are with the airlines who are closing on a regular basis. So with the last finance, this has been vetted through the finance subcommittee, and at this point, we're looking at, do we move forward with this one-year contract, which was strongly advised by the procurement office here at City Hall, or do we go back out to bid? The dilemma that we run into is we've got to plan bus routes. We've got to notify parents where their kids are going. So it's not like just trucking vegetables to Pasadena or vice versa. It's setting up a system. So right now, we've got that one bid in it, and the increases, it's about an $80 per bus increase per day, which is about 30% increase.
Now, we had
fuel and other costs.
We had an opportunity to regionalize busing with Leominster, and we decided not to.
Yes.
And hold out and get more bids. As we all know, that didn't work out for us. Hindsight, was that a bad business decision there?
Well, I first of all, I can't say that, as we all know, that didn't work out, because a 5-year contract has complexities involved in it that I'm just learning, in terms of there's a purchase of new equipment that is a part of a 5-year contract, which means all new buses. So that is going to be reflected in that bid, whereas with the 1-year bid, there's no purchase of new equipment. We had people sitting at the table during those negotiations. Also, a lot of the economies that Leominster did, we've been doing them for 5 years. So whatever economy they got because they're implementing things that we've already been doing for 5 years, in terms of the way the bus routes are set up, the transportation of kindergarten, things like that. I can't remember what I was going to say. This is a good time for you to.
Yeah, no, it's good.
When I forgot what I'm going to say.
What I would just say, in response to that, is that when you hear conversation about the idea of regionalization, is an attractive idea because it brings up the opportunity to go and save some costs through economies of scale and things of that nature. And there's a presumption out of the gates that the contracts for both cities are identical. But what Andre was speaking to was that when you get into some of the T's and C's, the terms and conditions of the contract, that there was elements of the Fitchburg contract that didn't exist inside the Leominster contract, so it wasn't an apples-to-apples contract comparison. I think that what we need to do is, as we move forward in time, in the contracts, in the requirements, get closer to being apples-to-apples comparison. We need to keep that door open to think about, a regional contract, but that, as of this point, it's not the same type of contract.
And I had that explained because I asked many of the same questions that you're asking, Councilor Tran, and of the procurement office here, and said, give me some details as to why the decision seemed to be wiser to go with this 1-year contract. Because I know in terms of my oil bill, you want to lock in for 3 years on a certain rate or something like that. And a lot of the information that I got back, once I heard it, made sense, and I could see why we would make a different choice.
But no matter what, obviously fuel's the wild card here.
Right. And, just one more comment on the transportation. In respect to transportation, my philosophy to this account is similar to the athletics account. I believe we should provide transportation in such a manner that it does not inhibit us providing an education to our children, because educating our kids, first and foremost, priority. The technology account, the new position, technology director, was that the only title that you guys came up with?
Well, because that's what it is, and I know school systems that come up with all kinds of other titles so that when you look at their administrative chart, they have fewer administrators. I'm calling a fish a fish. It's a director, it's an administrator, and it's absolutely necessary. So I could come up with other names that might not make it stand out so much, but I need someone to direct our technology initiative from one place with the capability and the qualifications to do that?
Well, the public and private sector are similar in one way, in that salaries are tied with titles. In the private sector, we don't fill out directors' positions as easy as we have been with this new budget. And I can see a different title with a lesser amount allocated for the salary that can provide the same service, rather than handing out this director level, because Mr. Reynolds knows as well, he's in the private sector, that the director level commands a hefty salary. And, that is, I believe, this is one of the things that going to contribute to our future demise, because there's too many director levels out there that we're passing up. Now, with all honesty, Superintendent, I went through the budget 3 times, and quite honestly, I don't like it. It's because there's 2 common points going from one school to another. The first point is there's a big salary increase for a portion of the staff. And the other common point is the lack of funding for textbooks and classroom supplies. It doesn't seem as though this budget is really for the kids. Case in point, you take Rheingold Elementary School, for example. A reduction of 70.1% in textbooks, going from 523 to 125. 425 to 125, my mistake. You mentioned that on the elementary school level, they don't need textbooks. Well, they don't need textbooks because they don't have textbooks to use. That's just astounding to me, to see a budget like this where monies are allocated for salaries and new positions, and not allocating where directly having impact for the children.
I would just like to, it wouldn't be fair to just leave that comment in the air without saying that, teachers educate children. That's part of the salary. If we had a book in the classroom without a teacher, it wouldn't work. If we had a teacher in the classroom without a book, it probably would work. And I'm not defending a lack of, educational materials, for sure. But let's all appreciate that, the teachers obviously are a key part of making the whole educational process.
I concur with you. I think our teachers are fabulous individuals in our school system. And whatever we can hand to them to make their jobs easier, that is my goal.
Same page.
Thank you.
Councilor Joseph? All set?
Yeah.
Councilor DiMartino?
I'd like to, as you know, I've made phone calls to you over the time, and I'd like to follow up on the facts that I'm looking at. You've got a $2 million increase from last year, and with the grants that you had last year, with the 44 million, it came to 56 million last year. That was the budget with all the grants in and with what the city gave you, which was 44 million last year. Am I to assume, which assume is a bad thing, that this year your budget will be 58 million?
No.
No, because you're not going to get as many grants.
Well, okay. First of all, the grants are not part of net school spending. So I could get $20 million in grants, and it wouldn't change the city's contribution requirement at all.
No, I understand that. I'm just talking about the overhaul, the big picture.
Okay.
You had 56 million last year in the budget with your grants and with what the city gave you.
54,260.
Oh, well, then I thought you got 56.
Okay.
So I'm stand corrected.
The chat, yeah. So 54,260, and the grants last year, there's a flow chart at the back that has the grants. Had 7 million. Oh, it's in the back of the whole, in the back of your package.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So last year, the actual budget that we received was 44.1.
Yes.
The 56 you're talking about is with the indirect charges, which we
Yes.
never see. So the actual budget of money that was used to educate students was 44.1. Last year's grant amount was 8 million. So basically, our budget was 49 million.
That was
And
last year.
that was last year. So this year, if our budget is 46 million and we have another 8 million, which already we don't because a number of grants have already disappeared. Like there's a Reading First grant we had for 500,000 that's gone. So there are other grants that are gone. So if we had 46, and let's say we did get 8, then it would be the 46 plus the 8 would be what we're using to deliver services to students.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got the maintaining of efforts for the first time this year from.
We were close last year, maintenance of effort.
We've maintained our maintenance of effort over the years. We were close last year, but we may be slightly short. Hopefully, we'll make up a little of this. Plus, our goal this year was to make sure we covered the 09 net school spending requirement. And hopefully, we'll make up any deficit.
And you're getting a percentage of the Medicaid money also.
We don't get the Medicaid money. The Medicaid money goes to the city. The arrangement that we have with Medicaid is that if there was ever anything over $2 million in Medicaid money, whatever's over it, we would share 50/50.
Actually, I think it's over 1.2 million we split. But
And-
this year, we're going to bring in a little over 900,000, and we projected 800,000 for FY09. So it ends up being retained by the city.
And what would bring it up to 1.2 million? What would bring it up to 2 million? How would that work? How does it work?
Well, we actually just started doing some new Medicaid billing 2 years ago to try to get more money. And right now, and I don't think the legislation's passed yet, but it's like we just got to the table and they started clearing the buffet. There was something called administrative billing, where you can bill for the time that all the administrators work on special education. So last year we started billing that, and now there's a bill before Congress to eliminate that billing. So as opposed to an ability to get more and more Medicaid money, my guess is we're going to get less and less Medicaid money because the federal government, which is having its own problems, is trying to eliminate all these opportunities to get reimbursed for Medicaid.
That third-part billing, did you not know about it, or it just wasn't picked up?
It hadn't been done. We hadn't been doing it here. And when I hired Dan Schreier,
It happened.
he came in and said, let's go after this administrative billing.
Now, I know we're talking 46 from the city, and I know at the end we're talking 51. What is the percentage and how much do you spend? And you know what I'm going to talk about, textbooks again. I do it every year. Out of 51 million, how much do you spend on textbooks?
That's one of the munis pages.
While you're looking, if I could just make a comment on the textbooks, because a statement was made earlier that I'm not sure, I think it bears repeating, which is that a number of the grants that we've received in the past have been used to buy textbooks. So I think a statement was made that we didn't have textbooks for elementary schools. In fact, we do. And the school committee has had the opportunity to touch them and go through them and talk with each of the principals during their presentations. And they're wonderful. They're new, they're wonderful, they're associated with Bay State reading, they're associated with Singapore math. When textbooks are grant funded, you have the materials. So therefore, that dollar allocation isn't needed on the school budget side because those exist. Those are capital items, so it should and probably would fluctuate from year to year based on changes in curriculum and changes in need. So I just want to make sure that people out there know that we have wonderful materials, especially for the elementary level.
And I would welcome any of you now to go in and look at the reading materials that we have in our elementary schools. It's state of the art. And it came with all the professional development, all the training, all the, everything that goes with it. There's a line item on the front page of the Munis budget that says textbooks and supplies, $373,000. Now, that's not just the textbooks. That's also for huge cost is Xerox. And that's the flip side of not having as many textbooks. Most teachers run off materials. That's how people teach today. There really aren't a lot of textbooks at the elementary level, and even at the middle school, 5th and 6th grade. You start getting into textbooks when you're in the 7th and the 8th grade, where the level of the curriculum and the material has to be much more regulated, and then clearly in high school. But in the elementary, most teachers will tell you they do more Xeroxing and duplicating and creating their own materials than they do handing out textbooks. But that's not $373,000 in textbooks, it's textbooks and supplies.
I'm talking about perception now. I mean, we get a story, we don't need them in elementary, we have more than elementary. Let's forget that. $51 million, and the perception is every year that we don't have enough textbooks. So we're talking perception here. Mm-hmm. Then I look at your budget, you got rid of 2 janitors. This is the time when the school should be cleaner and kept up to thing. Then 2 secretaries. And did you get any cafeteria workers? Anybody let go in the cafeteria? Okay. There's a perception that the little people go first, and the fat cats are still there. And right now, it's a perception, but it's real. It's happening. I hear it every day.
Is it a perception or is it
The
real?
perception is that we've got 51 million and we don't have enough textbooks. It goes, if anybody is telling the truth, they'll haul here in this room. And who's let go? The janitors, the secretaries, and what happens to the big fat cats? They're still there. That's what's going on out there. So that's accepted, that's the reality. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm hearing. Maybe nobody else is hearing, maybe they just call me up so they think I'm going to tell you what's going on, but that's it. When you say that people sit around the table and sports, it's not much money, but they put it into sports. How much was put into the music program?
A music teacher, another music teacher.
And how much would that be a year?
A teacher's salary is $40,000.
So
we have a wonderful music program.
Oh, I know you do.
We put money in the budget last year when we cut $3 million. We kept a music program going. You can talk to other school districts. They cut the whole music program. I'm interested in the fat cats because I've been looking for them, and I was promised with them when I took this job, and I haven't found them. I've actually cut 3 of those fat cats in the past 3 years.
You could cut a few more.
That's what I'm looking for.
You can cut a few more.
Okay.
$51 million is an awful lot of money, and 280 children are not in the school system. So the budget goes up, and I understand fuel, I understand health, I understand all that. But surely, and all you great people, you all do a great job, and there's great teachers and all. But when does it stop? When does it end? When do we say, 51 million, do you know that's more than we get the whole city to run on? And we're here looking for pennies. And when you lose 280 children in the school system, This is sad. Because, and I understand kids come into school, I understand they leave, I understand the foreclosures is affecting you, I understand all that. But the budget has gone up 2 million and we have 280 children less.
That's right.
And what is your dropout rate?
It's come down in the past 3 years. It's down to 8%. At one point, it was 13%.
That's the good side. So that's the positive side.
Yeah.
That is the positive side. Now, I'm going to ask you, as you know, we're losing police officers. And I'm going to ask you if it's possible in your budget that you could afford to put a policeman back into the school system. And I would ask you to consider that. That's only a request. And there's a reason for that. I don't know why the 280 children are gone. I don't know why. I'd love to know why. But having a police officer's presence in the school definitely helps kids stay in school. They have a role model. And I'm just asking you if there is some grant or something that you're looking into that we could work with you on that. But perception is you have fat cats. Perception is that when you're laying off people, you lay them off from the bottom end of the totem pole. You're getting 2 million more than you did last year, and you lost 280 children. That's the perception, so I just thought I'd tell you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors.
And you know I'll tell you.
I know you do.
Councilor Solomito.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Avenel, thank you. The question, you put down that you had 8 teachers retired this year, or 8 teachers were laid off, will be laid off for $320,000? You put down
8 actual teacher reductions.
All right.
Yes.
How many of those do you expect to be from retirement or through attrition?
We only have about 5 retirements.
So 5 out of the 8 are actually going to be through attrition.
Well, they might not be because you have to have certification, so the people who are losing their jobs may not have the certification for the people who are retiring. So you know, it's not automatic that somebody, today more than ever, everyone has to have, I just signed 35 letters today, and of those 35, I think maybe 17 or 20 of them were letters to people that I have to let go because their certification has expired.
That's more than fair. If they're not certified,
right,
we don't want them.
Right.
But how many do you expect to retire?
There are about 5.
5 retirements, I was thinking.
Right.
On the, I guess we're going to go back to that issue of textbooks.
Yep.
And you mentioned that it was up to each principal to make their own priorities as to how they were going to spend their money. And for anybody watching or who cares to listen, Crocker School, through their principal, chose no money for textbooks. The community pilot school, well, Commonwealth Pilot School, picked 0. And the principal at Rheingold Elementary picked a mere $125 for textbooks. It's a little disheartening. I guess they put their priorities in athletics. But I'm glad to see that McKay went to $3,000 and South Street went to $2,400. But it was a little disheartening that there were some principals who picked 0 for textbooks. And I know that you mentioned that, you know, the coming thing is to have things Xeroxed. But there are some principals who feel that textbooks are important. And I know that when I went around the neighborhoods this past summer, many parents said, my kids come home and they don't have a textbook. And maybe they don't understand the new wave of education. I know I don't. I get reminded of it every night. But, you know, I think that some principals found 0 requests and others found a reasonable request. Question I have, what is a discretionary fund that you've listed for $18,000? What does that go into? Or what constitutes a discretionary fund?
I'm not sure what that refers to. Just also on the principals, because it's kind of like everybody's supply closet has gotten stocked at different levels and at different times, depending on who was there and what money was available. So you may have some schools who actually have a better stocked supply of materials and texts, Or you might have a school that was part of the Bay State Reading Initiative and received all of its reading materials as part of the grant. So they might not be putting any money in textbooks where somebody else might not have that and is putting money in textbooks. So I don't know whether that plays a role. What page was it that you were referring to?
And I guess it's actually on page 7 at the beginning of your
Yep.
book, and it comes under the grant funding example, under expenses. Is that money earmarked through a grant, or
Well, okay,
at the very bottom of that?
all of page 7 is one grant. All of page 7 is what's called a Title I grant. So it's over $2 million. And then the breakdown is how that $2 million gets spent throughout the district. For example, look in the middle, parent involvement. You, by law, have to spend 1% of the grant sending, communications to parents, providing cookies and coffee and all of that. So the discretionary funds is, after everything is done, there's $18,000 left of a $2 million grant for the district to actually decide how they might want to spend it. The rest is very carefully dictated by the grant and then audited by the federal government.
Could I just add that? So the idea, Councilor Solomino, is that when we get grant money, there's strings attached, right?
Right.
In this case, Title I says there's a prescription, and that takes up 9/10 of the page. It says you have to do this, and this. You just have to, and I'm telling you that you have to. Those are the strings. But you know what? That little bit at the end, there's no strings attached to that. Exactly what it is, figure it out.
All right, I mean, that's fine,
That's what that means.
thank you. I mean, it wasn't a criticism at all, I just wanted to know what it meant. School choice, it appears as though we bring in about $794,000, roughly. Do you know how much we spend sending our children to other schools for school choice?
It's $5,000. No, it's more than that now. What did school choice go up to per kid? 55. It's a little over 5,000. I think it's 55.
And how many, and I know it's going to fluctuate every year, but how many do you think we're going to be sending out this year?
I don't have that. I mean, all that number, that's all on the Department of Education website, so I can get that for you. We're projecting bringing in $660,000 in school choice to the district.
No, I thought I saw in the thing here that you anticipated bringing in $794,000.
For the coming year, I don't think so. I think that was last year, right? Isn't it 660 or something for this coming year? School choice FY09, that must have been, I think that's an old number, 794. Dick, hasn't it been adjusted?
Yeah, I don't have that. I could find it, but I know the cost of kids going out, the charter school, which is based on the cherry sheet. I have a projection for next year. It's about $3.4 million for kids going out.
In school choice, right, between
Charter
charter school
school.
and other districts.
Does that also include the $2.6 million for tuition for private schools? Is that part of that?
No, I don't think tuition,
Over and above?
that's special education.
All right, and we're mandated for that, correct?
Yes.
All right, that's what I thought. The expanded hours that the Academy Street School
Yep.
has, and I understand now that B.F. Brown is contemplating
They've
or considering...
applied, we're waiting, any day, we should hear whether or not they've received it. That they've made those decisions, we're just waiting to hear.
What does that cost the city in terms of expanded hours, if anything? And I appear as though Ms. Giaquinto says no, none?
No, nothing, no. It doesn't cost us anything.
Okay, it's the same
It's
as if they
actually, if a school goes to expanded day, we receive $1,300 per student, and that covers all the expenses.
All right.
So that additional time doesn't cost the city $1 more.
So if B.F. Brown joins up, no big, okay, thank you.
Right.
And you also, and I don't mean to take up much time, or any more time, utilities in your budget, you haven't really put down any increase.
I've added, I think, 270,000 in the page that had increases. Utilities increases, $271,658
All right, I misread the wrong page.
on page 29.
All right, that's my, and I apologize. I read that wrong.
There's a lot of pages.
No, I read it wrong. They call me Sonny, but I'm not too bright. I have no more questions, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Di Natale.
Thank you. Just some quick facts here. How many students, what's the percentage of students that we have on free and reduced lunch in the district?
So some of our schools, it's as high as 80 to 82%.
Varies.
District-wide, it's at 59%.
How many students do we have approximately that are homeless?
About 150. That changes on a monthly basis, but we have contacts in every school who collect that data, and we get reports weekly because the status of a student may change day to day. But so far this year, it's been about 150 students that have passed our doors.
Did we have a number, a percentage, or a number on, I'm just curious, how much contract increases cost the district next year? Did we have any kind of...
1% increase is $350,000.
So in total of all the unions in the schools,
Yes.
it went up how much? 2%?
2%, roughly 2%.
So 700,000?
Well, that does not include, but that does not include steps.
Okay.
That for teaching staff, there are steps after so many years in your 10th year and your 11th year.
And master's degree.
I think the overall increases with the 2% and with step increases was about $1.2 million. So right away, you went from 44.1, and then added 1.2, just to cover salary increases, not counting utility increases, that's not health costs or anything else.
Okay, and I understand that busing is a city issue. In terms of, I mean, Committeemember Reynolds, you stated to me when I was even on the school committee with you that, well, we were talking about this, that it's not really the school's job to determine busing for the district. It's really a city issue, and I guess the question goes to the mayor as well. Well, first my question is, Leominster, do they bus all grades in their district? Or do they, I'm hearing, I haven't confirmed this, that they don't bus their 7th through 12th graders?
They do. They bus 7 through 12, yeah.
So they bus every grade?
Gardner has eliminated high school busing last year because of the deficit.
So the state does not require us to bus, is there a law that says that we have to bus students at a certain point, and then after that, we don't have to? Was there a grade cutoff?
I think it's up to 7th grade.
So 7th grade, we must bus them. So technically, high school, we don't have to.
That's right.
It's not an easy subject to broach, because a lot of parents obviously would prefer having their kids bused probably, and but in terms of a cost-cutting measure, seeing how other districts are doing it, that's something to consider as a whole, city council and schools. I understand that our high school is located way out there, but it's something to consider because it's a skyrocketing cost, and if we're not mandated that we have to do it, we're not breaking any laws, you know, it's something we should consider in the future. I'm just throwing that out there. My next question is regarding buildings. How many school buildings, or owned by the city, with school buildings that, I know South Fitchburg is no longer being used. Are there any other buildings besides South Fitchburg that we're not using that we haven't gotten off the?
No.
So South Fitchburg is the only one?
Just South Fitchburg, and then there's that little cottage or garage. The maintenance building is one of ours, is being used. It's just South Fitchburg, and then there's a little cottage behind South Street.
Now, when I was on the school committee, one of the budgets that we passed when we did the full-day kindergarten implementation, it was stated by the school administration that we had people who were ready to go in there or potential suitors, and it's still not being used. Is there any movement on the city's part or on the school's part to take control of this property and to sell it, and not use the school system as a realtor, because you're not in the business of real estate. We're not using that building. It's a very nice building. It's off the tax rolls. Are we going, I mean, because this has been discussed for almost 2 years now, so I'm practically getting a little impatient with it. If we're not going to use it for leasing purposes, as was the original goal, is there active steps being taken to sell this property and collect some revenue off of this property, since hasn't been used in 2 years?
Well, I would expect, we actually had a couple of probable tenants even up until late spring, so it looked like something was going to happen. But I would expect to see this on the school committee agenda sometime in the fall.
Well, I hope it is, because I actually would like to go beyond the leasing and just sell it, because I don't like the idea of the schools leasing. I prefer to just, get some money that way, sell the building if we're not going to utilize it. But 2 years is a long time for me, and I just hope that's another area we can continue to broach.
Counselor, if I may, several school buildings have been declared surplus and have been turned over to the City Property Committee, and votes have been taken on that. I'm not sure about the South Fitchburg School, if that has been declared surplus. No, it hasn't. So if it were declared surplus, then it would be turned over to Councilor Clark's City Property Committee for a
Who would declare it
discussion.
surplus, Council President?
The school committee would declare it surplus.
The school committee needs to approach you,
Okay.
if I may, and say to you, there's no longer the need for bricks and mortar at this address. Take
Well,
it back.
I hope that happens, because it's been a couple of years now, and, it hasn't been used yet. And I'd like to just get it into surplus if we have to. My last comment more so, the MCAS test that we go through every year. We see the news media, how they unfairly portray our school system, because I remember last year on the school committee, the results that came in were pretty positive. There were some bad areas. There were some areas that needed improvement. No one's perfect, but there's a state level that we have to meet to get out of that underperforming status or needs improvement status. It doesn't bring to light the improvements that you've made. You could increase your subgroups and your total categories by 10-15%, and that's still not enough to meet the state's requirements. But they're going up. And I recall a headline in the media last year, it said only one school passed. All the other schools failed. That's misleading to me, because all the schools, for the most part, improved. They just didn't improve at the rate the state wants us to. We're going to get there, but, that's what sells papers. And that's a positive thing. You can't report that. So I have a big issue with how we're perceived in the school system, in the public. I attended the Scholars Banquet at the Sheridan. What a great ceremony. And the best and brightest of our students were honored. Nothing in the media. Because that's a good thing. They wouldn't print that. So I want to thank you for the hard work you're doing. There is improvement in the MCAS scores last year. The question is, how quickly can we get them up to where we have to be? But we're making strides, just not at that quick of pace, because it will take time. I'm not going to say any more about budget issues, because Councilor Tran, they touched on a lot of things that I was going to ask as well. The increases in salary of $1.2 million really irks me. But if that's the case, that we don't need textbooks in elementary schools, or we do have some in reserve, or we do have some, it sounds like the explanation is that it's not that they don't have any, it's that it varies by school. But I do agree with some of the comments that the council's made on those issues. But the busing and the building, I'd really like us to look into. And, I don't want to be a cheerleader, but again, it was good signs last year. Well, no, it was positive signs last year. There were a few groups that went below, but in total, it was better than the year previous. And it wasn't accurately reflected. So I just wanted to bring that out. Thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Andre, in your school budget, city indirect charges estimated $14.5 million. It's a big part of your budget. When do you close the book on those estimated charges?
It's usually the end of June, beginning of July, and then that has to be verified. What I'll be doing is bringing that to the Finance Subcommittee, and then there's a sign-off from the superintendent and the mayor.
Would you say that that figure is a conservative figure? That it is likely to be okay?
I think it's pretty close.
It's
but you would have
close.
a better.
I don't think it's that conservative. I think it's a more realistic number. We now have ways on, the big cost here are the health insurance for retirees and actives that we calculate, and we actually generate the numbers now via the system. So it's driven by the payroll system, and as the superintendent said, these numbers are, the end of the year report, which confirms all of these numbers, is audited every year on a separate audit by the outside auditors, and that's submitted to the Department of Education.
Which kind of leads me to the health insurance question. Being the biggest department in the city, has there been any kind of concerted effort by the school department to educate its employees about having other kinds of health insurance?
Yes, and actually, we've been involved in the conversations, and I know I've brought this up many times because we meet weekly with the treasurer and the finance office here, the statewide insurance, and that's been explored. And for Fitchburg, it's not the right deal. You know, for some towns, I know Athol saved $700,000 by going to that. For us, it wouldn't. But I would imagine that those are the kinds of topics that will be part of the conversation with ongoing negotiations. That's been the conversation in other communities, but these are communities that are at 90%. And most communities are moving from 90 down to 75, where we are. So that for a lot of them, it's an easier topic to put on the table because they're already paying 90%. And they're looking at communities paying 75 or 50. We're at the 75. So it's and oftentimes when they do that, they're only having a bigger percentage on the percentage increase. We're going to take your health over the next 3 years. We're going to take it from 90 to 75, but we're going to give you a 4.5% increase. I actually think the New Leominster contract did adjust the health costs as it gave additional percentages. So it's a conversation in every district right now. Health costs are really killing everyone. Absolutely.
Is there something in our health insurance contracts that states that that guarantees certain health insurance policies like Master Medical? Does the city guarantee that you have to pony up on stuff like that?
I believe I defer to the HR person, but I believe there are some contracts that may still specify Blue Cross Master Medical, but I think that the goal is to amend those contracts as we move forward. I can't comment on that, where that is right now.
That would be the goal.
Yep.
Technology, Andre, you mentioned that we had recently gotten a deal with Comcast for high speed. Are we working, because that's a big part of Mayor Wong's plan is IT in the whole city. Are we working in conjunction, we, the school committee, school department, working in conjunction with the city for IT citywide?
Well, we're having those conversations, and then also, I think somebody said the contract is being renegotiated.
Right,
so we're
with
looking
Verizon.
at that in terms of what can we get provided to the schools as part of that. So, yes, there are cross conversations going on.
Very good. Safety in the schools, we had Chief Demora in, and I had asked him about learning resource officers, and Councilor DiMartino mentioned it earlier. I think it's a must in city schools today. If he had indicated to me that he was going to talk to you, and I'm wondering if any talks have happened about having police officers in the schools.
Yeah, we had a number of conversations about that. He actually called me before he got the job, just saying, "Hi, I'm from Lowell. I'm looking at this job. Where are you at on some of this stuff?" And one of the things he talked a lot about was resource officer. So I told him, here's what my philosophy is on it. This is what we're doing. And then when he got here, we had another conversation, and he reiterated his commitment to that. But he also reiterated his issues with budget. We had 2 resource officers in September of '07. In January of '08, I had 1. And that was not a lack of money. It was funded. It was because it was a lack of human bodies who needed to go to do the dispatching at the police station. So we've had those conversations. He's definitely committed to it. It's something that I think is crucial. He also talked about there is a grant, which I think Councilor Martino brought up. There is a grant right now that he's looking at that he and I will be working together on for funding resource officers.
When it comes to funding, if it gets down to it, and we need officers in the school, and you said resource officer, I want to make that plural. We need more than that out of a $46 million budget, a quarter of 1% can go towards the safety of the kids in the school. That's how strong I feel about those resource officers in the schools. We have to have them. Take a look at the newspapers. Some of the things that these officers have done in the past few years have, well, thank heavens they've done that.
And I'm the choir, and I told the previous chief and this new chief, I have not one negative comment about any of the officers that have worked in our schools. They have all been incredible. They understand their role. They work incredibly well with our administrators. We have not had one issue in 3 years between the police department and their role, and it's just been incredibly cooperative.
I have all the faith and confidence in you and the police chief that something will be taken care of. Thank you.
Councilor Caddy?
I'll give you a minute, just a couple questions. If you could turn to page 17, under the line items. Under the athletic coaching, there's a $35,000 increase. Are you adding more coaches, or is that
Yes,
just...
adding more coaches.
How many coaches do we have?
That I don't have the answer to, but most of that would be targeted to the middle school. We're looking to put middle school programs in, which have pretty much all been eliminated.
And the second big increase is $18,715.
That was part of the budget that was in a revolving account line item. So it was in the budget last year, but it was not in the right place. And so we're moving it into the athletic budget so that you can see it. It's there. Now, that's the danger of, I guess I could have left it in the revolving account and nobody would have ever known. But I really am and have been building a transparent budget. And over the past 3 years, I've moved lots of money that was in these big grouped accounts and put them where they belong. So that's not additional money. It was being spent on athletics last year, but it was not showing up.
My question is that 19.6%, is that going to one person? It says athletic program director.
Is that also the clerical staff? That's not his salary.
Clerical staff.
Is that his salary?
It's part of his salary.
Okay, so yes.
It's going to the one person?
Yes, yes.
Now, was that a 19% increase from last year?
No, it's a 2% increase from last year.
2%, so...
Part of his salary was here in the athletic budget, and part of his salary was showing up in another salary account.
But you understand my question.
Yeah,
It looks like he's getting a 19.6%
Right, which
raise.
is why it would be easier for me to not make those changes, but I'm giving you budgets every year that are representing more and more the actual line items, because last year, you could have looked at this and said, geez, I know Ray, or I know the athletic director, and I know he makes more than 76. And that's because another part of his salary was in a different line item. So over the past 3 years, as we've worked with the Munis budget, I've tried to make the budget reflect more the actual line items. So there is, that person is receiving a 2% increase in salary.
All right, you answered my question.
Yeah.
Then the last thing I'd like to say is, I spoke to Chief Demora today. There will not be a school resource officer next year. And I think what everyone's asking, without coming out and ask you, did you guys explore it, and can you afford to pay for some resource officers?
That's a conversation that the school committee would have to have at this point, because it'd be going back
I
and
hope
revisiting
that
the
the
budget.
school committee, Jim, I hope that you are also as concerned as we are.
I hear you.
At this point, there will be no resource officers coming out of the police department's budget. They can't afford it. They've got cut, and you've gotten an increase in your budget. It appears to me out of a budget this large that allocating money for a couple police resource officers would be the right thing to do. So I think I'm asking you to look into it. And we kind of like beat around the bush, but I think we're all on the same page with it. Thank you.
Councilor DiMartino?
I just want to go back to a question about, and I'm kind of shocked at the number. I'm not shocked at the lunches or the busing. I'm shocked at the number of homeless children. Somebody said 100.
Over 100.
I'd like to know what your definition of homeless children are.
It's a very broad definition, actually, and it even includes doubling up. So if someone loses their home or has to let go of their apartment and goes and lives with relatives, they qualify as homeless.
And do you get a grant for homeless children?
We get a $25,000 grant only to provide them with necessities. Like we're providing some children with eyeglasses. We're providing some children with backpacks. We're providing, there's a whole list of things that we as a school system can provide them in terms of materials, but we don't get money to pay for their education.
You don't get money to pay for it. They're paid for by the, what do you mean you don't?
They just are part of our population.
Yeah,
So
but
if
you still get the same percentage
That's
for
right.
each child.
Right.
And what is the difference in neglected delinquent children from luck? And that's a $30,000 line item here. Who are they? Who are those children?
That's actually a federal requirement through the Title I grant.
Okay.
And that's a requisite set aside. We have a contract with Luck, and they provide services. Title I students under the federal law are students who are at risk for learning difficulties, and we contract with Luck to provide students they work with outside of the school district with services they provide, but it's a federal mandate and it's a required set aside.
Okay, thank you very much.
And the reason that Paula Giaquinto knows that much about Title I is that last year and for the 10 years before that, the district had a Title I director,
Yeah.
which I cut from the budget. The year before, I cut a director from the budget, so I have fewer fat cats than I did. But this woman here is now doing the job of 4 or 5 people. And those are the other administrators that were here for many years who are no longer here. And you can see she oversees a $2 million grant in terms of all the responsibilities that need to be done. Because when we're audited, she's the person who has to explain it. And she does a phenomenal job. I wish I could clone her.
I think she's wonderful, but I'm still telling you, you got fat
I
cats.
know you are. I'm going back tonight to look for them.
Well, I can help you find them if you like.
That's a date.
That's a date. I'll be at the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Councilor Joseph.
I just quickly want to make comments. This is the first year in 3 years that we haven't been having devastating cuts. And that's a great thing to see that the children are starting to stabilize in the school is being able to provide them the services without keep going backwards. Now we're at least stabilized. Because there's less population, you have less kids coming in. That's not a bad thing. It'll allow the school again to recover and stabilize just a little bit more. But I think the main theme throughout all of your presentation has been empowerment. The empowerment of your school councils in order to do the job that they need at the school level to determine what their budgets are, and the empowerment of your administrators to be able to determine what they need to do with the amount of money that they have to do it with. And that's a big key to making the successful team that you have, so that you can get through areas of difficulties and still make it into not a bad situation, make it into a positive situation. At the level of cuts that we're going through at the city level, I mean, this is the empowerment that we're looking for our department heads here within City Hall to be able to make their own budgets, determine what their needs are, and come up with a collective thing. And that's all part of the reorganization that's gone on here. And I think that you're a great example as to how you can take your team, empower them to do their job with less, because we're always asking to do more with less, and still come out and educate 5,000 students a year. So, I mean, you're a great example of how to empower people to do their job and still have a very successful school system. So I want to thank you for that.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. The one thing that does generate negative attention in the school district, and it's justified, is the condition of the infrastructure. We have the SBA, the state is going to be doing considerable work with Crocker. They're doing one project per year, one school per year, based on the priorities that the school committee and the administration lay forward, what they think their number one critical thing is. Crocker's getting a new boiler system, heating system, which is badly needed since it was shut down for days last year. I mean, that all attracts negative attention. I have a lot of parents coming and say that they always talk about the infrastructure. And the biggest concern I have is the drop in enrollment, because whatever we lose in enrollment, we lose in funding. So, and again, this is a big decision that has to be made, and the mayor's got to be on board with it. I'm not a fan of loans, but we're not going to get an infusion of cash anytime soon to take care of B.F. Brown, Memorial, Academy, South Street, and parents are so concerned about these issues. I really think what needs to be done, we've already had an assessment done there by ex-Councilor Romano, Councilor Boisvert was involved in that, and other people as well, that prioritize the necessities of each building and what we need to fix. We need to do an analysis to see first if the city can afford this in the long term, if it's cost feasible. We need to do an analysis on priorities of what we want to get done first. And I'm talking sweeping infrastructure improvements, because we're kidding ourselves. We're not going to get money in the next 5 or 10 years to cover all those projects. We took out a $10 million loan for the grit facility and other projects of the wastewater because it was mandated by the state. And I really like the financial team in the city, as well as the mayor, with conjunction with the school committee, see everybody getting involved to see if we can afford long-term loans to fix at least a couple of our school buildings, because every year they get worse. Every year we get negative attention. I know the school building needs committee is on top of a lot of these issues. I don't know if they've discussed this with the mayor, but I think the only option we have at this point, due to time, is a loan to do the construction and the infrastructure, because we're not going to get $10 million in 5-6 years to do what we need to do. So we really need to do a big analysis on this, make sure we can afford it. If we can't afford it, what can we afford in the long term? But, you know, we can't keep putting these off, and we're not going to get an infusion of cash. I mean, the state's going to take care of one project a year. That's not quick enough for us to get the things done that we need to get done. So, thoughts or...
Yeah, well, the big analysis that you're talking about is really a few components. We want to make sure that things are done in a consistent and transparent manner, and it's not just, oh, here's this emergency, let's put it out. Oh, here's another emergency, let's go over here. We need a capital budget, and that's something that we're putting together right now. I personally, myself, don't have the expertise to put that together. So right now, I'm doing a gathering of data. Okay, we've got the assessment that Councilor Romano did. We have a school buildings subcommittee, and we have a new school facilities person. Okay, they can gather information. We're trying to do the same thing on the city side as well. So we've got to gather all this information, because a loan is a vehicle. The size of the loan, we don't know yet, because we don't have all the information. Because we could say, here are 10 things, we can afford $10 million, here's the $10 million, and then we forgot about these 5 things. So then we don't have the money to do those 5, even though they might be high priorities. So that's one, gathering the information. Now, then who makes that assessment? So that's where the Capital Improvement Commission comes into play. And I'd like to see them empowered and in charge of making those decisions and recommendations on a capital budget. So first is the creation of a capital budget that has all that information, has every single thing that we own, all the assets, the condition that they're in. And then the second is to have a body, an independent of politic body that makes the determination of prioritizing those capital items.
Mr. Mayor, so is this capital budget that we're going to be concocting, is that going to be a rolling budget, annual operating plan every 5 years? So, because that's how it usually gets done, is we have a 5-year plan. We don't fund everything in one fell swoop, but next year we could prioritize, and I believe we have leeway with short-term loans. I mean, things that we can do in a year that the city can afford. And since we're building our reserves, we're going in the right direction in terms of lenders. But if we're working on that and it's going to be brought forward, that's wonderful. I just hope we can roll it, and we don't have to do everything in 1 year, but we have a 5-10-year plan that details everything that we're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, well, there'll be a multi-year plan, a 5 or 10-year plan, but there will be an annual operating budget that goes along with the operating budget. So I've tried to emphasize that the budget that you have before you is an operating budget, because it implies that it's not the entire budget. It's an operating budget, and then there's the fixed costs and capital budget. And those are things that we'll talk about the police cars. It'll talk about what prioritization we're going to do for the school. So we may get to the point where we may say, you know what, we're going to spend 3% of our total revenue on capital items. So we're going to do $500,000 for roadways every year. We're going to do $500,000 for school building improvement every year. And then we may decide to do it that way, or we may say that if we take out loans, right now you see the treasurer debt service line item. I mean, that has a lot of what you're talking about encapsulated in there. So our capital budget every year, I'm going to take some of that out, put it in the capital budget. I mean, it's going to be the same line item. So, if we took out a $10 million loan, let's just call it $1 million a year, you wouldn't want to cut that $1 million because, we're on the line for that loan. And then we'd see what our, how much space we would have given a ceiling that we would self-impose, determining what the capital would be and what the operating would be. And of course, we would fluctuate between the two, depending on what our needs would be.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Superintendent, I want to move away from spending and let's talk about saving. Do we have a plan in place, or if not, would you consider putting a plan together in terms of cost reduction in electricity use? Because we spend an extraordinary amount of money for utilities, and half of $2 million goes to electricity. Have we replaced light bulbs with energy-saving light bulbs?
That's like I couldn't have set you up better to ask me a good question. In the last district I was in, 2 districts ago, I brought in a company called Energy Education, and they were to come in and they promise you savings that they're going to in the area of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And they've been in that community now for 13 years, and they have created millions of dollars of savings in energy. And you do all the light bulb stuff, but what they do is change your behavior. It's not equipment driven. It's driven by analyzing every day how the electricity is used. I brought that company here last year for the first time before the school committee. They've been before this school committee now, I think, twice. And I'm ready to sign on the dotted line and get them going here on July 1. So the answer is a resounding yes. And I'd be glad to provide the same information to the city council that I have to the school committee. It's a full package that shows over, I think, a 10-year projection of how much and it's guaranteed. So if they don't, and if you have a shortfall, they write you a check for the difference in terms of what you have not saved. So it's a guaranteed savings.
That's great to know. Yeah. That's great to hear. And you're absolutely correct about changing the behavioral. At the same time, changing the device. Two examples that, those 4 light bulbs on top of President Connery there, if you change one of those light bulbs, it costs us $9, but you save at least $57 per light bulb. Just imagine the cost saving there.
Exponentially.
And the behavioral change, I received a couple emails a couple weeks ago from a resident saying that she drove by that school that we no longer use, the South Street School, and noticed that the lights outside were on day and night. So that's something that
Right. This
consider.
person that would be hired by the school department working for this company, that's exactly the kind of thing they would do. Driving around 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, going in and out of classrooms, seeing how, and that's when you start to rack up the savings in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
Excellent.
the answer is yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
May I just add to that, in the interest of time, I'll keep it brief. We may put that person on the bicycle if the fuel goes up, but also, one of the things that I would say to you is that just not the behaviors, but another thing, and it kind of gets into a capital item as well, kind of connecting those two dots, is that, the school committee is also investigating technology that would require, relative to building heating and air conditioning, that would require some capital investment from the city. And I expect to be coming to you and talking to you about that through the school committee, but which will decrease the operating costs. So the point is that you may have to pay $9 for that light, and we're going to save the $57. But it's not just the behavior of changing a light bulb; it's also some large dollar capital items that relate to heating and air conditioning. Looking into that too.
Thank you.
Yes, Andre.
And I just want to make a couple of comments. One, to respond to Councilor Solomito, my principals will hang me if I leave and don't respond to the text issue. So I want to just look at Crocker Elementary's Munis page, and although the principal has the textbook account at 0, if you look at instructional supplies, she raised it from $10,797 to $17,462. So I think it's a shift of thinking that when you see the line items of textbooks and instructional supplies, I think those are the lines that they're looking at. With that said, I want to say that I hear all of your feedback. You talked about text, materials, you talked about safety officers, you talked about energy use, you talked about a focus on academics and education. So I find this exercise helpful to me. We don't have a lot of conversations, and it's a chance for you to give me feedback and the school committee, because we're spending the dollars of the city. And then I want to end just on this. The last month is the most exciting time for a superintendent. You go from one awards assembly and graduation to the next. And in traveling through the past 3 weeks, I met this one couple and their daughter at the dinner, the honors dinner, at the awards day, at another function, and at graduation. And they came up to me and said, "Wow, we're going to miss seeing you." And they don't live in Fitchburg. And their child is here on school choice. And he is a high school teacher in another community. And they could send their child anywhere they want to. And they have chosen to send their child to the Fitchburg Public Schools and just graduated from Fitchburg High School. And I could give you name after name after name of people who I talked to who are here on school choice because they're choosing the Fitchburg Public Schools as where they want to educate their children. So I'm proud of these schools. I'm proud of the staff that work here, and I'm very proud of those schools being a part of this city, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about our budget.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any further questions? If I may be a bit facetious, you forgot one thing. You forgot to mention fat cats. And I just want to remind you that we do not have an animal control officer in Fitchburg. So if you find any...
Now I know.
If you find any fat cats, don't call us.
Okay.
Thank you very much to you and your staff for doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
And councilors, we will convene at 8 o'clock on Saturday.